Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Everybody in New York, good afternoon. And if we have people out on the West Coast, good morning. And in Israel, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you. AFSI has been trying over this COVID time to bring you some of the most interesting and important topics and people to really let us feel and really let us know that we are not disconnected. We are Am Yisrael, and we are one people. And I appreciate all of you joining us over and again. And I see new faces and new names, and welcome to everybody. Today, we are thrilled to have with us Amir Avivi. So, among other stellar achievements, Amir, a 7th generation Israeli, right, Amir?
15 generations.
How many?
15.
Oh my goodness, 15th generation Israeli.
Jerusalem.
Served as a brigade commander, deputy division commander, and head of military school of engineers. He also served as the aide-de-camp for the chief of the general staff of the IDF, Lieutenant General Moshe Bogie Yaalon. That's someone who, for all the old-time AFSI people, we know that there was a very close relationship between AFSI and that Lieutenant General. Amir retired as a Brigadier General in the IDF. In February 2020, he founded Habithonistim, which is a tough tongue twister for me. It's a group that has quickly grown to over 2,000 high-ranking reserve officers and current IDF personnel. The group has attracted commanders and operators from the Mossad, from the Shin Bet, and from the Israeli police, the Shabbat, as well as many leading academics and researchers. Amir remains CEO of this organization. The vision of the organization is to enable policymakers and the public to understand that national security is the #1 priority to ensure that to ensure Israel's survival, and to have a clear and deep understanding of Israel's national security needs. They aim to revive the core Zionistic Jewish values of the state of Israel, which is the cornerstone of national security. We are so honored to have him speak with us and look forward to hearing about his organization's top priorities in keeping Israel safe and to whatever else he's feeling we should know about today. So welcome, Amir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored and excited to talk to this distinguished forum. And I think our two organizations share pretty much the same values. We understand that securing Israel is the most important thing there is. And I'll start maybe by telling a short story, which happened to me while I was in service. And maybe during that time, the roots of the idea of establishing Habithonistim, or in English, it's called Israel's Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, came to be. As Judy said, I was aide-de-camp of the Chief of General Staff, Bogie Yaalon. Before that, I was a battalion commander fighting during Operation Defensive Shield in Judea and Samaria. It was a very, very complex time after Oslo, after Israel handed areas to the Palestinians, and they, of course, used these areas to start terrorizing us and attacking us. So eventually we had to conduct a huge operation in Judea and Samaria to reconquer all the area again. And at the same time, in the Gaza Strip, after we handed the Palestinians the main cities inside Gaza, they built huge capabilities, terror capabilities, and started shooting rockets and mortars and conducting attacks on the towns inside Gaza, the Jewish towns in Gush Katif and the surroundings and so on. So it was a very complex area. I finished my position as battalion commander in 2004 and became the personal assistant, the aide-de-camp of the Chief of General Staff. And it was really, first of all, it was an opportunity to me to see things on the national level, working with the Prime Minister, Sharon at the time, with the Minister of Defense Mofaz, with the General Staff, and really dealing with very complex issues. And one day, I was in the headquarters with the Chief of Staff, and suddenly we hear on television that the Prime Minister of Israel decided to disengage from Gaza. Now we were shocked. I mean, think about it. All of Gaza is burning. The Palestinians are shooting thousands of rockets on Jewish towns. We are conducting operations almost every week around these cities, but without really reconquering them. And suddenly the Prime Minister of Israel decides that he's going to kick out 6,000 Jews from their homes, give all this area to the Palestinians, and connect Gaza to Egypt. So a few days later, there was a cabinet meeting, and we had to prepare for this cabinet meeting. And I participated in this, I would say, sad and historical moment. And we were sitting in this meeting. Prime Minister Sharon asked Bogie, he said to him, listen, I decided I want to disengage from Gaza. Now tell me what will happen. And Bogie said to him, listen, if you get out of Gaza as you plan, if you connect Gaza to Egypt, in 1 year, Gaza will become Hamastan, Al-Qaedastan, and Hezbollastan. This will be a lantern, an area that will be controlled by terror organizations. Then Sharon looked at Avi Dichter. Avi Dichter was the head of Shin Bet, the head of the Shabak. And he said to him, okay, I heard Bogie, what do you have to say about that? And he said, exactly like Bogie, this is going to be Hamastan, endless amount of weapons, of know-how, of terrorists is going to flow in and out of Gaza through the Egyptian border, and we lose control of this area. It's going to be hell. And Sharon said, okay, I'm going forward with my plan. And 3 months later, 2 or 3 months later, he fired Bogie. Bogie was supposed to serve like any commander of the IDF for 4 years. At the end of 3 years, he didn't let him continue 1 year more. And instead, he brought Chalutz. Of course, he said to Dan Chalutz, listen, if you want to be chief of staff, you better do what I want. And then Chalutz stepped into office, and in maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, the whole Israeli defense establishment suddenly changed its position and said, okay, it's not going to be Hamastan, it's going to be Singapore. Think about it, okay? I can understand that a crooked politician can decide sometimes really bad things anywhere, also in Israel. But how can a defense establishment, just because they changed now the chief of staff, change completely its position and say that it's not going to be hell, it's going to be great? And they didn't only say that. When Israel disengaged from Gaza and redeployed the forces around Gaza, the IDF made a peace deployment. taking in account that there is going to be peace, which is completely contradictory to reality. And while these two things were happening, a very large group of generals was writing letters. I'm talking about former generals of the left, were writing letters and publishing letters in the media with a lot of money behind that, saying that the disengagement from Gaza will make Israel safer. And we all know how all this turned out. All this turned out to be living hell until today. Every few years, we have thousands and thousands of rockets being shot in Israel. The rockets are getting bigger and bigger and more dangerous, and they are hitting Tel Aviv. And today, the Palestinians in Gaza are able to reach Eilat, the north of Israel. They can hit us everywhere. This is the result of the disengagement. And I understood at that moment that, first of all, there's something really wrong, and we cannot trust politicians. We cannot even trust the defense establishment, because if, for example, tomorrow morning, Prime Minister Bennett will say, I want to disengage from the Jordan Valley and Judea and Samaria, the defense establishment will probably say, okay, this is a political decision, it's a democracy. We'll manage. Now, I can tell you from a professional stance, not even from an ideological one, if we do that in the Jordan Valley and Judea and Samaria, and I'll show some maps and I'll explain about that, and if you can make me host, I will be able to share also the maps. If we do that, from a military point of view, Israel won't exist. It will take a few years and Israel will be destroyed. Now, any military man should understand that. If I bring a Japanese officer, high-ranking officer, or American or British, and I show Israel's map, and I ask him what will happen if Israel will be only along the shores, controlled by the high area of Judea and Samaria, if it is going to be all Palestinian or Arab, he will say, okay, that's it. You stand no chance. But unfortunately, the IDF is not going to say that. So I understood that there needs to be an organization, and it's an organization not only of officers, but a huge organization that the people can come around, led by high-ranking officers and commanders, that will talk about one thing only: what is needed for Israel to be secure and prosper for generations to come. What are our red lines? What do we need? Now, since this kind of discussion didn't exist, there wasn't one single organization that can speak from an authoritative point of view. People who know what they're talking about, that are professionals and are only dedicated to Israel's national security, that can say what is really needed.
Amir, you should be able to share your screen now.
Thank you. So basically, a year and a half ago, I decided to establish Habithonistim. Habithonistim in Hebrew means the high-ranking security experts. This is usually the way, it's slang, it's not proper Hebrew, but this is the way the media, television, when they interview a very high-ranking officer, a former general or something like that, they will refer to him as a Habithonist, as a securitist, as somebody who is a really expert in this area. So we said, okay, we are going to take this term, and this is us, because we are the only ones from the generals that really look at things from Israel's point of view, from Israel's national security point of view. We don't take peace plans and then try to squeeze or try to adapt the security to a peace plan. No, we say, first of all, let's say what are the security needs? What does Israel need to prosper and be secure? Then we'll see which peace plan can fit that, not the other way around. Today, institutes, national security institutes in Israel, and former generals on the left, which actually are becoming pretty much radical left, they push forward a specific a plan, the two-state solution, but a specific two-state solution, which basically means setting up the terms for Israel's destruction. And when you confront them with professional questions, or even questions have to do with basic Zionism and Judaism, they have no answers, because there's no way to really explain what they want to do. And I'll try to a bit talk about that and explain things. So I would like to start before I go into what's going on in Israel. I would like to say a few words about the Middle East today. We need to understand what's going on, and there are big opportunities and big threats. First of all, this is the map of the Middle East, but I hope you understand that this map is not really relevant anymore, because countries around us are pretty much collapsing. Iraq is not a real country anymore. Syria is not a real country. Yemen is not a real country. Libya is not a real country. Lebanon is hardly a country today. Jordan also very problematic. Some of these borders are still drawn, but they don't really exist on the ground. They don't look like that in reality. So the Middle East has undergone a lot of changes. And something really big happened in the Middle East in the last 12 years, which affects what's going on now. Until 12 years ago, the Western world was completely dependent on Arabic oil. And the Arabs had a lot of power. Everybody needed their oil, so they were very strong politically. And 12 years ago, the states became completely independent, talking about production of oil. And not only that, the United States started to export oil. So suddenly, the Middle East became not so important. And this is why at the time, Obama, when he stepped to office, was able to completely change the politics around the Middle East. And we looked at the Middle East the way an American president looks, and he said, okay, since I don't depend on them, I can decide whatever I want. It seems to me that Iran is a much more serious and bigger country, and much more advanced than all of these Bedouins in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and so on. I want to do business with the Iranians. And this created a shock in the Middle East, because suddenly all these Sunni countries understood that the many years they had an agreement with the states that they give the states oil and the states will defend them was over. Now there is a new political game, and the Americans are supporting the Iranians and not them. At that time, Israel stood firmly against this policy and said Iran is the main threat to the Middle East and to the world. We are not agreeing to this change of policy. And if you remember, Prime Minister Netanyahu, former Prime Minister Netanyahu, he came to and talked in front of the two houses, and he said that we don't agree to this policy. Iran is the real danger. And he said something very, very, very important. He said, I'm not representing only myself, the Sunni Arab states. And this was amazing. It was the first time that there was an understanding that connection with the Arab world. This is why we're having all these peace agreements that you are seeing now. The Sunni Arab world is completely depending on us for its existence. They don't trust the United States anymore. They understand that there will be all the time changes, and they don't know what will happen, who will be president, and so on. So they are fighting Israel, and this is why things are changing. Iran is a huge threat. Iran is going towards a nuclear weapon, and we have reached the point where we might need to act militarily against Iran. And unfortunately, we're seeing the administration behaving more like Chamberlains than Churchills, not understanding how grave this is, they're not understanding that the Iranians are threatening the whole Middle East and they will threaten the whole world. And therefore, we are talking to the administration. My organization is talking a lot to the administration as well, explaining that Iran cannot be appeased. Iranians don't understand force, and they need to be dealt with. We cannot lift sanctions, because if we lift sanctions, they will use this money to terrorize all the Middle East, and we need to be tough on them. So basically, on one side, we have the Sunni Arab world more and more tending towards Israel, and by the way, they don't care anymore about the Palestinian issue at all. Simply, they don't care. On the other side, we have the Iranians threatening the Sunni Arab world, threatening Israel, and we can see an emerging alliance. Iranians with all their militias on one side, and the Sunni Arab world with Israel. But we also have another group, and this is Sunnis who are radical. Sunnis who are radical is like Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, and groups that are not Shia like the Iranians, but are Sunni, and they are trying to destabilize their own countries, but also they want to attack Israel. So I would say we can see three coalitions at the moment. Now, talking about Israel, I want to show you this map. Look, Israel, at the end of the day, from Tel Aviv, from the sea all the way to the Dead Sea, is 45 miles. That's it. It's like a city in the States. It's 1 hour drive. This is Israel, that's it. Now, from this 45 miles, most of the area is Judea and Samaria. This is the main area. We have only 9 miles of shore. And we have 9 miles or something like that of Jordan Valley, and that's it. All of Israel is Judea and Samaria. And anybody who has any basic understanding of geography and understanding of military issues understands that the entity that controls the mountains controls Israel. That's it. That's simple. So my organization says, first of all, listen, there is no existence to Israel and the Jewish people in Israel without full control of the mountains. We have to be in full control of Judea and Samaria. This is one thing. The other thing, we need a defensible border, and the only defensible border we have is the Jordan Valley, which actually enables us to prevent anything from the outside, from Jordan, from Syria, from Iran, from Iraq, to come into the mainland of Israel. So we need a strong border, the Jordan Valley, and we need the mountains. And the only way to control these areas is the towns. I wanna make something clear. The IDF is not controlling Judea and Samaria. The Jewish towns are controlling Judea and Samaria. Without the Jewish towns, the IDF wouldn't be able at all to defend anything. It's the fact that you have 500,000 Jews driving every day along the main roads. This is what enables the IDF to work. If it wasn't like that, the IDF would be ineffective completely. You would need 20 IDF to try to do what the IDF is doing today, and this won't be enough. So the towns are the real security assets, and this is why applying sovereignty, this is why bringing more and more Jews to Judea and Samaria is crucial for Israel's future. Now, many people don't understand this issue, and many people think something that is really wrong. People think that if we apply sovereignty in Jewish areas, not in the Palestinian Authority, this means we are going to give 2 million Palestinians Israeli citizenship. And this is completely false. You have many, many states, more than 30 states in the world that are surrounded by another state. And the overall security is in another state. I'll give you an example. Take, for example, Italy. In Italy, you have 3 states. One is Italy, but inside Italy, you also have the Vatican, a recognized state the size of a neighborhood. And you also have San Marino. San Marino is a state in the north of Italy, surrounded by Italy. They have no military. They don't have their own airspace. They don't have their own military. It's all Italian. And nobody is claiming that San Marino is under apartheid or something like that. And nobody is claiming that the Vatican is under apartheid. So, by the way, when we look at Trump's plan, this is not an Israeli plan. This is an American plan that was reviewed by the leading international lawyers. It's exactly the idea. Trump's plan says Israel can apply sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. Israel can apply sovereignty in Jewish towns, and still you have a Palestinian entity, San Marino state, something like that. And they conduct their own life. And this is only one kind of solution. My organization, are talking about 4 different solutions. All of them don't undermine Israel's future. All of them don't undermine Israel's security. All of them don't include giving the Palestinians any more land. And people are really stuck with all the ideas that there's no way to really implement them without destroying Israel. And we are investing a lot of time today building an education process where we talk to pre-army programs, where we talk to high schools, when we talk to students. We do it in Israel a lot. We are also more and more trying to reach the Jewish communities. We want to educate as many Jewish communities as possible, especially the young generation, and talk about these issues and show that we can be proud Jews, we can be proud Zionists, we can love the land of Israel, we can be secure and prosper, and we can also find solutions. We can do all of that. And give people hope and also pride. We can be proud Jews and still try to do peace in the future, if there is somebody to do peace with, because the Palestinians basically mostly must want to destroy us. They don't want peace really. But at least we need to know what we want. We need a vision, a clear vision, and we talk about that. Now, we are going to, by the way, just to show you, this is a photo from Judea and Samaria, how it looks from Judea, Tel Aviv from Judea and Samaria. Basically, it's enough that you have 1 anti-tank missile, and that's it. Nothing can move in the center of Israel. So you cannot even have 1 anti-tank missile, 1. This is what I mean when I say full security control. So basically, we need to really engage in educating as much as possible. Now, since we are a very big organization, we have 2,000 officers and many, many supporters. We can reach many communities. I can tell you that in the operation we had now, we reached out to communities. We had something like 70 different communities that came back to us and says, we want to understand what's going on. In 3 days, we talked to 70 communities. Because we have a lot of people, and we talked in Italian, in German, in French, in English, Hebrew. We have different officers who speak different languages, and so on. I will soon answer the questions. I will go over them, and I will talk also about Gaza. So we are going to build now a leading institute, National Security Institute, that will be devoted to the security of Israel and the Jewish people for generations to come. This institute is going to be very unique. First of all, it's the only institute in the world that is going to deal with this question, what is needed for secure Israel. It will have a very big education center, and it will have also the grassroots movement of Habithonistim that is reaching to all of the society. It will have a very strong media ability, and of course research. We are going to research, but we are going to do practical research. I'm not interested in papers for the sake of papers. I'm interested in policy papers that can affect policy and help the society understand the issues and also help decision makers. So we are doing that, but we're going to do it much more, engaging with the politicians, with the ministers, prime minister, and so on. We also talk to the Congress and Senate. In October, we're coming for a week to Washington, and we're also flying in October to Europe. And we're trying to bring our voice as much as possible everywhere. But really, the big thing is giving the knowledge to the society, taking supposedly complicated national security issues and simplifying them, because it's not so complicated. There are things that it's easy to understand. What are really our security needs? So, Judy, I think at this stage you asked half an hour. We did an overview, and I would like to continue by addressing the questions. So if you can go over questions, then I will answer.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Okay. Thanks so much, Amir. I think you've really given us so much to think about, and we have some very good questions. I guess you saw them coming up in the chat box. Helene, would you like to start with any of the questions that had come up?
Helene, you're muted.
Yeah.
There I am. Okay. Judy, we have some questions that we put up. Do you want to ask those first, or you want to?
Yeah, please go over the questions and I will address them.
Okay, so the first question comes from Reuben Gordon, who says there have been reports of new futuristic looking Israeli weapons, drone mounted lasers, enhanced Iron Dome systems that can destroy rockets and missiles as soon as they're launched before they're airborne. How real and important are these and other possible new Israeli weapons?
Talking about air defense, Israel, of course, has advanced immensely in many areas. Now there is also we are working on a laser capability. So I would say that if looking 20 years ago, Israel was something like 90% offensive capabilities and 10% defense, this has changed dramatically. The ability of the IDF today to defend against rockets is dramatically much better. And it's going to be even better in the future. We're able to defend against missiles from Iran, from Lebanon, and so on, but it's not endless. I mean, if we, for example, if we have a war with Lebanon and they have more than 100,000 rockets, we're not able to just shoot down the rockets and that's it. We will have to maneuver very fast and conquer huge areas in Lebanon to stop this shooting. In Gaza, we're able to decide not to reconquer Gaza if we want to. Now, there was a question about whether we think we should reconquer Gaza. I want to make something clear. There is a difference between overall vision, and our overall vision is very simple. Zionism is a simple idea. It's about a homeland from the Jewish people in the land of Israel. That's it. And the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. It's that simple. Having said that, we are facing a very complex reality. When you meet reality, you understand that you have to sometimes take decisions that are not necessarily exactly according to what you would like. If you ask me theoretically, I would like to conquer Gaza and take out all of the Arabs from there and build Gush Katif again. But if you are realistically speaking, what we have to be dealing today is mainly the Iranian threat and the Lebanese threat and the Syrian threat. Israel cannot afford to put all its army now in Gaza, because this will undermine the main mission we have, which is Iran. And this is why, at this stage, Israel doesn't want to reconquer Gaza, because we want to be ready for bigger missions and more important missions. It's actually the Iranians who really want us to go in Gaza. They are paying the Gazans to shoot us for us to go in and get involved inside Gaza and not deal with them. We're saying, no, we're not going to play this game. We're going to be ready to attack Iran. This is our main mission. We are going to be ready for Lebanon. And maybe in the future, when time comes and it will be the right moment, we'll deal with the Gazans as well.
So Amir, building on that, we had, in the United States, there was a resolution not to lift sanctions on Iran, but Biden continues to pursue the JCPOA. Do you think it might be possible for the Abraham Accord signatories to come up with an alternative landscape for the American president? And do you think there's any possibility, I don't know how much contact you've had with them, for his advisors, some of whom are of Jewish background, to be swayed?
So first of all, I want to say about JCPOA that it's a terrible, terrible agreement, which basically says two things. One, that there is no real inspection about what the Iranians are doing. Two, that there is a sunset, which means that when this agreement ends, Iran can be fully nuclear. So it's only like kicking the can along the road. And in 7-8 years, this agreement is supposed to end and Iran will be nuclear. This is not something Israel can agree to. The other thing is that if sanctions are, the idea that you go back to the JCPOA, lift the sanctions, and then try to get a new deal with the Iranians, is ludicrous. I mean, it's obvious that the moment you lift the sanctions, that's it. They won't agree to anything. Why would they? So it doesn't make sense, even talking about the basic way you conduct these things. So I trust the Iranians in the sense that they are going to humiliate Biden. They are going to humiliate the US. And at the end of the day, I think that the administration will have no choice but understanding that the Iranians need to be dealt in a different way, or much tougher sanctions, or coordinating an attack on Iran. And it's amazing how much energy is being wasted around all this issue when like 15 minutes of air attack will get all of this issue over. And I don't understand why they're wasting so much time. I hope that if there will be a military attack, it will be coordinated, it will be the US and not only Israel. But at the end of the day, I'm saying from an Israeli point of view, we will never allow Iran to be nuclear. And if we have to do this ourselves, we'll do it. I can tell you, as somebody who was deeply, deeply involved in the status of preparations for such an event, Israel can do it if we want to. And I prefer not to do it alone. I think that the US should do it, but we'll see. We'll see what will happen.
Okay, our students get a lot of training in how to respond to claims of Palestinian self-determination, which is the claim that's supported by the majority of the UN. This is a question from Gerald Adler. What can you advise us as far as how to respond to those claims when we run into them from our friends and neighbors? What key words, what key phrases would you recommend that we use?
As I said, we educate a lot Israeli youngsters, and I'm always amazed to see how big the gap of knowledge is. When I ask 18-year-old Israelis, where did the name Palestine come from? 90% of them have no idea. Many of the youngsters in Israel, actually, I would say in many ways, have adopted the false Palestinian narrative. That is like there was a Palestinian state and we came as foreigners and conquered it. This is what is being told to people in universities and so on. This is even what some Israelis think, and they don't realize that the name Palestine has nothing to do with Arabs, nothing to do with Muslims, and everything to do with the Jewish people. It's about us, it's not about them. This is the name the Romans gave to the land when they kicked us out of Israel. They want to erase the name of Israel from history. And they decided to name Judea Palestine. And Palestina, this is how you pronounce it in Roman, in Latin, it's a name that Arabs can't even pronounce. They don't have a P.
Sure.
So this is first of all the most basic thing, that telling them, listen, go back to our Declaration of Independence. It's so clear. Our history is really simple. We have been sovereign in this land for 1,000 years. We were forced out of our own land by the Romans, by the Europeans, if you want. And we came back to reclaim our lands, that's it. And we didn't come to reclaim half a land, a quarter of a land. We came back to take Eretz Israel. And no completely by chance ceasefire line can define our national aspirations or our national needs. Yesterday, I answered somebody in Twitter, and I said, okay, let's say that in the independence war, we have managed to conquer Judea and Samaria. So if we have done that in the 48, this means that it's not occupied, or the other way around. Let's say that in 49, in Independence War, we would have failed to conquer the Negev or Jaffa. This would make Jaffa occupied. It's basic common sense. It doesn't make sense. You cannot decide what is Eretz Israel, what is the land of Israel by referring to a specific war and the way it ended. So we're saying, listen, we're all about solutions. We're all about talking about the conflict, but we don't throw to the garbage our values, our Jewish heritage, our history, our security needs, in order to solve a problem with the Arabs that eventually also want to destroy us. So you don't need to throw everything.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But I was just going to say, go ahead.
No, Judy, if you have a question, please do.
I was just going to say, building on what you're talking about with Judea and Samaria, Helene Abramson has a very interesting question. That's something that's bothered me for a very long time. Helene?
Okay, I recently attended a talk by an NGO that brought almost 40 European parliamentarians to Israel a couple of weeks ago. When we asked about the territory status and the theft of Area C land and the double standard Israel is held to, the speaker suggested that Israel needed to be more straightforward and stand up against Arab land grabs before expecting others to do so. To me, keeping the barbaric and arcane Ottoman law in place rather than insisting on Israeli law being implemented sort of reiterates Israel's reluctance to demonstrate itself as the rightful and legal entity in the territories. Semantics aside, is there any rational reason that the Israeli government refrains from enforcing the law throughout the land? They voted it down last week, the sovereignty law. So can you talk about that?
First of all, I agree. I think that eventually we have to apply our sovereignty, which means applying the Israeli law in Area C. The reason why we're not doing this, and I've spoke to Netanyahu more than once about that. Netanyahu, when he was prime minister, I'm not talking about this government. This government, we'll talk about it afterwards, but it's a completely different issue. But Netanyahu, the way he sees it, he says, if I don't have the US support in the UN, if we might get sanctions, this for us is going to be really bad, and I don't want to do something that without coordinating with the US. So he wanted to apply sovereignty, at least part of Area C in the Jordan Valley and in the Jewish towns, but it's the administration that changed the direction and stopped him. I'm talking about Trump's administration, and they preferred moving forward with the peace agreements and not with applying sovereignty. Having said that, the Ottoman law is not that bad in the sense that we can also use it and we can also grab land. And actually, I don't know if you know that, but in the last 5 years, 40 farms have been built in Judea and Samaria. These farms are cattle farms, and they control twice the area of all the towns that have been built since '67, Jewish towns. We're planning, and I'm assisting in that with my organization, to build 40, 50 more farms like that in Judea and Samaria in order for us to hold the land and not let the Palestinians grab it, because each farm not only controls the vast area, but also makes sure around this area that the Palestinians don't take over. So one of the ways you can support the issue of Area C is supporting these farms. And I must tell you that these are the real Zionists today. These are the guys that are really fighting for all of us. going on the ground, living a very tough life, surrounded by the threats of the Palestinians and also the Israeli army that, since it's in a way grabbing the land, also makes problems. But we can see that in 5 years, 40 farms exist with all the problems, and they are flourishing and moving forward. And we need to really do what Zionism is all about: settle, build towns, and we need to do it also in the Galil and in the Negev. And this is a part of the thing that my organization is supporting, and they need our abilities to talk to the government, to talk to the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister, to talk to the society about how important this is, and even help bring funds for these missions.
Wonderful. So in addition to land, this is from, again, Mark Karoff, strategic depth and territorial contiguity in Judea and Samaria. Do you consider control of historic and religious holy sites, especially the Temple Mount, to be just as essential to Israel's national security?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, my organization, one of the things we talk about a lot is one of the books that one of our generals, General Gershon Cohen, wrote. It's called "What's Nationalistic About National Security?" Unlike our generals of the left, which look at national security as if it is something technical, we say the essence of national security, the most important thing, is nationalism, is your energy, your ability to feel that this is yours. And this connection to our history, to our heritage, to our religion is crucial. When I talk, for example, with the young generation in Israel about, I take an example like Shiloh. So Shiloh, when I look at it from a military point of view, I can say Shiloh is situated along Road 60. This is the road of our forefathers. This is the main road that goes from south to north in Judea and Samaria. And the fact that you have all these towns along this road, this is crucial. This is what enables also the army to move around. So one thing about Shiloh is that it's attached to Road 60. But the other thing is that the eastern part of Shiloh is already part of the Jordan Valley. So it's also part of the ecosystem of the Jordan Valley. But then I say to them, listen, but the most important thing about Shiloh is that our ark was there for 369 years before it was moved to Jerusalem. This is a very important place for the Jewish people. And if we are willing to give up the most religious and historical places of the Jewish people, we are basically saying we have no right at all to be anywhere, not in Tel Aviv, not in Ashkelon, and certainly not in Judea and Samaria. So we are completely against giving up any heritage of the Jewish people, any. And we are all about bringing as many youngsters and so on to Hebron, to where the capital of the tribe of Judea was, where David the king reigned, where the tomb of our forefathers are. This is very important. Without that, no plane and no tank will help. It's all about, first of all, we need spirits. And there is no spirit without connections to your history and heritage.
Thank you. Leon Smedra, one of our stellar and very committed members, was connected, as we all were, to the new development of the Eviatar, which just had an agreement.
Sorry, I saw a question. I think it's very important to answer.
So what do you think about these new areas that are being developed, and should they be developed? Are they a danger? Are they a positive? Should we, are you in support of these kinds of things?
We need, first of all, we need more and more towns. I would bring 2 million more Jews to Judea and Samaria. The more Jews we have, the more security we have, the more towns and Jews we have, the more prosperous also the Palestinians will be. Now, I saw a question that is very important to say. If we build in Area C, are we in danger of apartheid? There is no bigger lie talking about this whole issue than using the word apartheid. It's not relevant at all because the Palestinians are governing themselves. They have their own judiciary system, their own education system, their own parliament, their own everything. They live their own life. Most of them work in Israel. The more factories, the more industry we bring to Judea and Samaria, to Jewish areas, that's great for them. And we are not controlling the Palestinians, they're controlling themselves. 2 million Palestinians live in Gaza under Hamas, not under Israel. And they're connected to Egypt. We are not controlling the Egyptian border. They can go anywhere they want. We cannot control what they do. In Judea and Samaria, there is the Palestinian authorities. They govern themselves. They got areas A and B, and they govern area A and B. We have overall security responsibility, and as I said before, there are many countries like that in the world. It's okay. We can have a system where we have the overall security responsibility, and they still govern themselves, talking about their civil life, and it's okay. This happens in many countries. So this has nothing to do with the word apartheid. The word apartheid is something completely different and not relevant to this issue. The fact that people who hate us use this word has nothing to do with reality. And also, I would advise everybody not to use the word territories. This is not territories. This is Judea and Samaria. This is our land. We should not adopt terms that are used to try to show that the land of Israel doesn't belong to us. So, and we tend to use terms that are not really in line with our values as Jews and Zionists. Even Israelis do that, unfortunately.
It's so wonderful to hear what you're saying, and I know that your organization is new. Traditionally, the word had been that anybody who had been, top brass in the IDF came out believing in a leftist sort of position. So I wonder, and it's fabulous that you're dealing with top level people. You told us you just met with one of the Polish ambassador, and you get to meet with so many people. Are you doing anything? Are you educating the young people? Are you right? And I think
as I said today, talking about pre-army programs, for example, there are something like 50 pre-army programs. We educate all of them. And most of them are the ones that become afterwards officers in the army and so on. And these pre-army programs today, we have like between 2, 3, sometimes even 5, 6 lectures in the same program. They are inviting us more and more for 2 reasons. One, that they think that what we say is much more connected to reality and also connected to the values they want to hear. They are appreciative of our authoritative voice. And we have the ability to reach many people, again, because we're a big organization. We have many lecturers.
And just one last question. how do we get this out to the mainstream media?
So now that we're going to, first of all, we're already in mainstream media. I mean, if you look at Habithonistim in YouTube, especially talking about the last operation, I myself have had more than 50 appearances in 2 weeks in the mainstream media in Israel. And so we are seeing our voice more and more. Now we're going to work with a very, very dominant PR company that is going to push even harder. So we get more and more into the media, and we're going to work with an international PR company. And I invite all of you, when we build the Institute now, to be part of that. I mean, I believe in my vision that every single Jew, and also Christians who support Israel, should be part of securing Israel. We need to all be have a stake in this process, because we need to educate many people. We need to educate also the youngsters and the Jewish communities. Many of them turn against Israel because they don't really understand the issue. And they have lack of knowledge. And we can deal with that. So talking about how to support, what I'll do, I'll post, wait, I'll share for a moment our, I want to show you.
Well.
So this is how you spell Habithonistim. Our website is Habithonistim, www.com. And there you can see how you can support us. So you can scan also the thing here, or write my mail. I will also write
Okay, this has all been taped, and we will be sharing the video on our screen, on our website under the video section for anybody who hasn't picked this up. But we will also send out your name and your and this information as we give a follow-up to this lecture. And again, Amir, I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and the almost 100 people who came on to listen to you. I think you've given us a really refreshing and optimistic look at the future of Israel. So
yeah, first of all, I must say I'm really optimistic, because I can tell you one thing for sure: the future of the people of Israel and the land of Israel is in Israel's hand. It's not in anybody else's hand. We can secure ourselves, and we can also destroy ourselves. So at least it's us. It's not somebody else. And we need to make sure that we do the right things. This is the whole idea.
okay. Well, as you know, we work very hard to try to promote a safe Israel, and I see you're doing the same thing. I think you're doing a fabulous job, and we look forward to meeting with you when we finally get to Israel, whenever that is.
That would be great. And I want to suggest, I said briefly that there are many solutions, to the conflict. And I think that you asked me what can we talk about in universities and so on, I would be happy to lecture specifically about that because this is something that people really don't know. They don't have the tools to understand what kind of solutions you can have without undermining Israel's future. And then this is something that I would be happy to discuss in a different lecture.
Terrific. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been really a treat to get to know you better, to meet with you, and to hear all of the fabulous work that your organization's doing. So I thank everybody for being here with us, and hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you very much.
Shalom, shalom.
Bye-bye.